name is Mary Eleanor Power, and I am the Director of Marketing Communications for the College of Continuing Education at Dalhousie University. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging that Dalhousie University is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. We are all treaty people. And I'm delighted to be here to present some marketing tips and tricks. I will be jumping from topic to topic in different areas, so please follow along as best you can. And I will be answering any questions, happy to answer questions as we move along, and would encourage you to add any questions in the chat or in the Q&A. And I will stop our poll now. We have a good sized group here with us today, so that's great. And I'll share the results. So it's great to see that there are a lot of people who are just interested in the topic. There are a lot of people who just want to know more about marketing. And so I'm really happy that you've joined us today. And then there are a few who have many years of experience. So I hope that you'll be able to take away some tips and tricks. And I'm happy to again, answer any more specific questions if I can. Okay, so let's just jump right in. And I do have another poll later in the webinar. So the first tip and trick that I'll offer is, oh, actually just one second here. No experience, okay, no experience, but we'll soon be taking on the Twitter feed for my department. Oh, that's great, Anne. Thanks very much for letting me know. That's good. So hopefully this will be perhaps a good introduction and give you some things to take away and apply. So the first tip that I'll offer is, and this just comes from experience, but it's more of a cautionary tale, not to jump right in, that sometimes it's best to take some time to evaluate why you're marketing, talk with your stakeholders, and really just take a step back and look around you before you jump in. So oftentimes we look at our competitors or we look at our peers and we see that they're developing a presence on a certain platform, or that perhaps, you know, we now know that TikTok is the new most popular platform and we think that we need to be there. But I think before you do that, one tip that I might have is just to evaluate whether your stakeholders actually are using that platform, and if it makes sense based on your brand to actually be on that platform. So oftentimes it doesn't always make sense for you to be there and to advertise on those platforms. So just one cautionary tale is just to, I think, always engage your stakeholders, talk to them, and get a sense of where they are and where they're communicating and where you can best reach them before you jump in and invest in a platform, because it does take a lot of work to manage a platform and to manage the content properly. The second tip, and we'll walk through about 10 of them today, and then I'll leave some time at the end. But the second tip that I would have is make sure that you know what you're measuring. So do some research into the KPIs or key performance indicators that you want to measure and tie it back to your goals. So one example would be that if you want to run some ads, or if you want to really just have kind of not even a paid strategy, but an organic strategy, if your strategy is to build awareness or build a following on a new platform, for example, if you've launched a new page on Facebook, perhaps your KPI or your key performance indicator would be clicks or page likes. And so you would want to each month or each week evaluate how you're working toward that measurement and that goal. But in some cases, if you're selling a service or a product and you're a well-established brand, perhaps your KPI is acquisitions or purchases. And so I really would encourage you to think about and tie your measurements to your goals to make sure that they align. And I would also say that in my experience, and I am only speaking from my experience, that some platforms are better performers for some KPIs than others. In my experience, Google search campaigns and paid ads through Google search are a really great way of building brand awareness, but they may not get you that person to complete that goal. So it may not drive for you, it may not drive purchases, but it's a great way of people if they're searching for a related keyword that would bring up your product or service in their kind of paid ads at the top, perhaps they'll see your product, and then maybe they'll make the purchase through another platform. Maybe it'll be through Google Display or Facebook. So I would just try to do your research to have an understanding of what platforms are really going to also support you in your goals and how people use them. The third tip that I'll offer is, and this is something that I've come across in conversations with my peers over my years, and I would just pause just for a minute. I realized that I perhaps didn't give you a bit of my bio or background. Many of my years are working with Dalhousie University in a variety of different faculties, and then also bring private sector experience through Crown Corporation, a business development agency in Halifax in the city here. So I've both worked in communications predominantly, as well as in marketing for the past decade or so. And one thing that I've come into conversation with some peers is around video production and photo shoots and photography. And oftentimes we think of those, associating those with a large price tag. I would just offer one tip, and perhaps you've already encountered this, but one copyright-free image site that I often source is called Unsplash. There are others that exist. Unsplash is a great resource to access photography that you can use on Instagram, on Facebook. I would just be wary that perhaps some of your competitors are also using the same images. So I would just be mindful of your use of them. But there are a lots of free platforms available. I just offer Unsplash as one because I really do like their photography. But the point is here that you don't need to break the bank to get some really good photography and incorporate them into your campaigns. And I would also say that there are some great video creation and animation creation softwares out there that you can use on a trial basis. And in some cases, you can purchase at a low cost. And along with that, what you're probably seeing on some platforms is that selfies and kind of DIY videos that, depending on the brand and your brand personality, may be a good fit. And it may be a good fit for you to use those in campaigns. We know that video content is often a stronger performer on platforms like Facebook. So again, it has to align with your brand personality and your goals, but sometimes you can use the approach of selfie videos and that sort of thing to get some traction in the market. Okay, now I'll move on to the next, which is more, in some cases, perhaps these are just helpful reminders to you, but I often see our social media platforms as this beautiful web. So I kind of pulled this photo of a spider's web because it really is this beautiful web, interconnected web of people and organizations, some of whom would be willing to share and promote your business for you. So before you pay for your subscribers and users and readers or customers, think about organizations that your stakeholders care about, reach out to them and see if you can tag them or work with them to build your following and help you reach your goals. I'm sure that a lot of you have either sat in on webinars or been part of conversations about, social media influencers. And that's, in my mind, what I'm talking about is similar to the idea of bringing in influencers to elevate your brand. It's really about marketing your brand and getting the word out, but getting people to endorse it. One thing that's incredibly powerful that I think transcends a lot of the paid marketing that we see is that personal endorsement. One of your peers saying, I really loved this product, or I really love this service, and here's why. It's the reason why in Facebook, for example, we have the option of, if you're a user, to ask for recommendations. Who would recommend a plumber in your area or a housekeeping service? Those endorsements and user reviews go a long way. And I would say that in some cases have a stronger reaction in the market than paid marketing. And those and testimonials and other ways, but really the essence here is to leverage the web, leverage that spider's web, that network of people and organizations that might care about your brand and are already using it and really enjoy it. I see a question in the, oh, should we be seeing a different slide? I'm still seeing slide 2. Oh, my apologies. Let me just move through here. There we go. Sorry about that. There was a bit of a glitch or a delay there. But here we are with the spider's web that I've mentioned. Thanks very much, Jennifer. I appreciate that. All right, so let's move on. Let's see if this will work for me. There we go. Okay, so if you want to run a paid campaign, my suggestion here is to do your homework before you get started. And there are lots of things that could be part of that homework, but I would say one thing that's really, really key is to have a solid project brief and to get a few quotes and have conversations with vendors so you can understand how to maximize your budget. So what I often do is I will get 3 or 4 quotes from different vendors, and then we'll compare kind of those. I will take those key performance indicators and I'll have those in my project brief. So I share that with the vendors so they all have the same information. And then I ask them, you know, provide me with some estimates of how you can best maximize my budget based on my target audience. This is really key. It sets the right groundwork and the right foundation to have a really successful campaign. Because once you have those estimates from your chosen vendor, you can always go back to those. And as you're running through the campaign, you can say, okay, where are we against these goals? Or you quoted on this particular click-through rate, for example, and this cost. How can we get it? How can we get what's currently performing closer to that estimate? So it's a really good way of always kind of keeping your vendor honest through that process. But that project brief is immensely helpful to make sure that you and the vendor are speaking the same language. I would also just add to that often there's a bit of an intimidation factor as we jump into, especially if we jump into new platforms or if we launch campaigns where, you know, we don't necessarily have that benchmarking. And I would just recommend and remind that, you know, you're an expert in your field, and that, you know, who you're engaging, those vendors, that they're experts in their field and they're there to maximize your budget and get the biggest bang for your buck. So always make sure that you're coming to the table acknowledging that you have different expertise and that you're leveraging the vendor and you're asking those questions and really being curious through that process in the campaign and getting their advice and just sponging as much information from them as you can. All right, so let's move on. Let me just check here, see if there's any comments in the chat here. Okay. All right, we're going along well. So the next one here are just a couple of things that I wanted to bring forward as things to avoid. So as I was preparing this presentation, I was thinking, you know, what are those things that were helpful to me, or things that I learned that I could pass on that may not be net new to you, but may be helpful reminders. And this is more kind of specific to Canada. So if there are any joining from outside of Canada, I think the same kind of rationale would apply. But I would say that in order to best maximize your budget, when you're identifying your target audience, just try to avoid kind of identifying full provinces or full countries, or especially provinces like Ontario. It can be really tricky and really expensive, actually, to target the entire province. So as much as possible, I would say try to be kind of niche and narrowed initially and see what that gets you, because it's going to give you some good insights into perhaps, you know, my stakeholders aren't where I thought they were, but it's going to make sure that you're not kind of spending your entire budget within a number of days. If you have a good vendor working with you, then they'll often kind of push you on perhaps we can target kind of smaller city areas, or perhaps they'll kind of have a conversation with you to try and better understand the personality type of your target audience. If you have any past email marketing campaigns or any kind of email data or provincial data that you can provide of past customers to your vendors, that can help them with targeting. But really make sure that you're as specific as possible to make sure that you're maximizing your budget. And then with regard to budget, I would say avoid setting unrealistic budgets. And a good vendor will tell you what's reasonable. It's hard for me to kind of specify what I mean by a realistic budget, but just to give you an example, I would avoid, if I was running an advertising campaign on Facebook, just on that platform, for example, I would avoid spending any less than $100 to $150. But it really depends on what your target audience is. I just often what I'll try to do is set my budget based on the number of days that I want to run the campaign, and then what I think is reasonable based on my target audience and the daily spend that I want to see. Of course, if you spend less each day, then you're not going to reach the same number of eyeballs, depending on, you know, if you have a large target audience. So just a couple things to keep in mind. And then the third thing to avoid, I would say, is avoid too many KPIs. So if you are, you know, monitoring click-through rate, like generally clicks, click-through rate, impressions, and if you're running a paid campaign or organic campaign, all of these KPIs still apply, because even if you just have a page on Facebook, you can get all of these insights through an unpaid presence. But really try to narrow in on, and this comes back to your goals. If your goals are to drive purchases or registrations, acquisitions, then your KPI should be focused on that. It should be focused on cost per acquisition and number of acquisitions. And if your goal is to kind of build brand awareness, if you're new to the market, then perhaps it's more about clicks or impressions. So those are just, it's just important that you kind of narrow in on those and avoid kind of confusing your campaign. Oh, now we have the delightful spam slide. And so what I wanted to bring forward here is that depending on your goals in your campaign or in your strategy, your social strategy, or just marketing strategy in general, you may want to bring an email marketing system into the mix. We know that people need to see an ad on average of roughly 7 to 10 times before they make a purchase decision, but I would say that this is more. And so you can't only rely on one system to have the impact, especially if you're trying to sell a higher priced item. So I would say one of the tips and tricks that I have, or not necessarily, more of a tip really, is to think about integrating an email marketing system into some of your marketing efforts, or even just, this could apply to retargeting, but really the point here is that you really should be mindful of the fact that that one interaction with your ad is perhaps not going to drive your desired action. And so a lot of these social platforms, like Facebook, for example, Twitter, LinkedIn, they can connect with email marketing systems where you can have automated series of emails distributed once someone takes an action on your ad. So it is really important here just to think about where you are, where you're following up with your leads, and how you're getting in front of them more than just once. That could be an email marketing system, or it could be retargeting, but just making sure that you have that as part of your mix. Okay. And here I would say one thing that I've learned over the years is don't be afraid to change course, and make sure you have a plan B for your creative. So one thing that I like to do is when I start a campaign or any strategy, paid or unpaid, is monitor it every day, and then start to monitor it every week. But definitely when you're setting out with your first set of creative, to have a kind of plan B or a B set of your creative, B or C or D even, depending on how long the campaign is. And along with that, going back to your KPIs and going back to your goals, if you're really not seeing that your campaign or your efforts are creating traction or getting traction, then maybe you want to change course. Maybe you want to explore another platform, or maybe you want to pause the campaign altogether. But I would say don't be afraid to do that, and don't be afraid to push your vendor on that either. You know, money is scarce and budgets can be scarce. And so just be the best steward that you can of those dollars, and definitely definitely pause if you're not seeing what you expect to see in the campaign. But that also goes back to having very clear goals, so that you know what's performing and what's not performing. All right. So I'm all about accessing resources and learning from other people. So the next two slides are going to be touching on that. And so I suspect that because you've joined this webinar that you are also a fan of accessing resources. I would say for me, what I like to use or tap into are free resources and courses through HubSpot Academy. There's some great kind of base level courses that are free, that are video based, that walk you through step-by-step of how to set up email marketing campaigns and all variety of topics. So that's a great one to access. And I would also encourage you just to stay on top of, this is more for consumer brands per se, but it's also great to kind of see what's happening in, you know, outside of our province and outside of our country, to be honest. And sign up for free resources through Adweek. If you visit Adweek, you can sign up for a lot of their different newsletters, and it's great to get some free webinars and also just some interesting articles and weekly digests of what's happening in the marketing world as a whole. I'm sure there are other resources that perhaps you access, and welcome other suggestions in the chat. But the best way to learn is by just looking for those resources, that many of which are free or are at a low cost. And along with that, I would suggest that, and one thing that I've done over the years, and now in my role in continuing education, I follow a lot of our peers and a lot of our competitors. Follow them on Facebook, I follow them on their social platforms, I sign up for their newsletters, and it's a great way for me to see what they're doing, and it's a great way for me to get new ideas. So I would encourage you to do the same, to sign up for your competitors or your partners' email communications. It's great to, for example, going back to my earlier point about that spider's web of people and organizations, if you want to build a relationship with a certain organization, or understand or get a better understanding if your stakeholders are following a certain organization, sign up for their e-newsletters, see what kind of content they're putting out there. And if you want to pitch a story to them, you'll have a better idea of what they're already discussing and what's really important to them. So I would encourage you to fill up your inboxes, I guess is what I'm endorsing. Fill up your inboxes and follow your competitors as well as your partners. And I would also encourage you to Google your competitors regularly. If you are thinking of running a Google search campaign, a great way to determine like what keywords you would want to add into your campaign would be to type them in Google and see what comes up. See how your competitors are using that platform, and stay informed. Really, that's the most important piece, I would say. And, you know, I would also just argue that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So, you know, if you see a great idea, or if you're the one that's putting forward a great idea and you see others doing it, I don't see any harm in that. You know, I think that that's the world that we live in, and it's great to learn from one another as much as we can. Just going to pause here for a minute and see. Pump Squad. Tanya, what do you mean? Maybe you can, I have a question here in the Q&A from Tanya, and I'm wondering if you can elaborate on that, Tanya. I'd love to better understand. You mentioned a place for newsletter. Okay, and so a place for a newsletter. Oh, okay, so would that be Pump Squad? Is that, maybe you can elaborate. Oh, a place for a newsletter. Let me just see here. Sorry, folks. I just let me just go back here for a minute. A place for, okay, let me see. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So Tanya's asking, she's hoping that I can just elaborate on mentioned Adweek and another one. So HubSpot Academy. Let me just put that in here. So HubSpot Academy is a great resource. They have some great free resources available that you can access. Some great how-to videos and different things like that. Yes, small community, so I like using Poster My Wall for templates on marketing materials, posters, or digital items. That's great. And you know what? Canva is also a great option. So Canva, I'll just add it in here. They have some free templates that you can use, or you can create posters and that sort of thing. You can create Instagram posts. So that's another great resource that you can access. HubSpot. Okay, I'm glad I could clarify that for you, Tanya. Thanks. Sorry for the confusion there. Pixabay for images. Yes, Krista, absolutely. Adobe stock free images. I don't always love that resource, but there are some there. And Pixabay is good as well. I do really like Unsplash. I'll just add it here in the chat. So Unsplash you can actually download on your phone as well as an app. And that's a really easy way of, like, if Instagram is a really important platform for you, if you download it as the app, then it's very easy to upload and use those images on Instagram. So just one other, I'm not seeing your chats, just my own. Oh, okay, sorry about that. Let me just change that there. Okay, so Unsplash I mentioned, HubSpot Academy, and Canva. Okay. There, and if someone can just confirm for me that they can see that in the chat now. Okay, perfect. That's great. So let me just recap in the last few minutes that we have, and I'm happy for people to add questions into the chat if they like. And so just to recap here, a couple of the 10 kind of tips and tricks that I walk through. So try not to jump right in, take a look around and scan your environment, know what you're measuring, try to find the free. So find the free resources, they're there, and they definitely make campaigns less intimidating for you. Get caught in the web. So find the people and organizations that can help elevate your brand and add those testimonials and those endorsements. Do your homework. So engage vendors, do a really solid project brief, and make sure that you're on the same page, and avoid some things like having too wide of a target audience, and what were a couple of the other ones? Too big of a budget. So those are a couple things to avoid. Connect to email, or really just broadly here is just think about how you can re-engage your audience so that they're not just seeing your ad once, but they're seeing it multiple times. So that could be an email marketing system, a solid retargeting strategy, whatever it might be. Don't be afraid to change course. Read, access the resources. They're available to you. I've suggested a few, but I welcome other suggestions. I certainly don't know all of them. And scan your competition and stay informed. That's really incredibly helpful and has been helpful to our team at the College of Continuing Education. So now I'm welcome any questions. Scheduling sites. Do you have any recommendations for scheduling sites? Later, Hootsuite. So Sprout Social is a great one, and you can use it for a free trial. So I'll add that into the chat here. Sprout Social. And Hootsuite is a great one. I have some experience there as well. Yeah, and they all have different, different capabilities, but really it's very much the same. But a lot of them offer free trials, so perhaps that's a route that you want to take if you're testing some out. Okay, elaborate. Can you elaborate on number 4? Absolutely, Krista, 100%. So what I mean by getting caught in the web is really just to find out, and maybe you can do this by talking to your stakeholders, find out what people and organizations they care about. So if you are promoting a service, but you know that, or you have an inkling that your stakeholders, they buy into your service, but they also care about this product, a related product. Perhaps there's an opportunity for you to create a relationship with that organization that sells that product. So then you're elevating your brand and you're creating this win-win scenario. So in a lot of times you can find organizations that your customers care about, and they also care about yours, and partner with them to kind of reach a wider following. So that's what I was trying to convey there, was just that I see social networks and marketing as really this kind of interconnected spider web. And if you find the connections and you're asking the right questions, then you can really leverage that to your advantage. I hope that answers your question. No problem. Okay, great. Any other questions that have come up? I know we're at our time here, but I'm happy to answer anything that's come up in your minds. And so while you're pondering or perhaps typing, I'll also mention that later today, we'll be sending out an email to all of you who joined and all of the folks who registered who weren't able to join us today. And I'll be sharing just a marketing worksheet. It really just asks kind of 5 key questions, some of which I went over in the webinar. And I hope that that will be helpful to you. And maybe it just will serve as a reminder for those who have been a few years in their marketing roles, serve as a reminder of some questions to think about or ask yourself, or have conversations with vendors if you're looking at paid campaigns. And then also the email will include a recording of this webinar. So happy for you to share it with your colleagues or others who you think it might be helpful to hear some of these tips and tricks. So I don't see other questions in the chat. And so we will wrap up there, but I'm so delighted that all of you could join. Thanks so much for taking some time. And I'll also include my contact information in the email. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out. And I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and take care. Thanks, Kelsey. Thanks, appreciate it. All right, take care, everyone.